So just, so you said 2 to 3% will be PHEV, so 2 to 3% of the hybrid market will be PHEV?
So I think it's like 5, 6, 7% hybrid, and then another 2 or 3% that are plug-in. Incremental on top of, yeah. So it's a total of 8 or 9% overall vehicles will be battery containing, large battery containing.
Recovered energy gain.
Yeah, thank you.
I have no idea. I'll go with Jay's number. He knows this far better than I do. The only thing, it took 10 years for Toyota to sell 1 million Priuses. So that's the number that I look back at and say, well, it's taken them a while. And I guess, and that to me is the punchline, and Jan and I have talked about this many times. Any technology, whether it's CNG, whether it's ethanol, whether it's biodiesel, to move the needle to any significant degree in global energy systems is a decades-long process. And that's the reality. As Václav Smil has written, he's one of my favorite authors in terms of energy issues, that energy transitions are incredibly slow, maddeningly so.
Yep, that's right.
Jan, are you going to weigh in here?
Yeah, I would cut Jay's number by maybe a factor of a third.
Fair enough.
But, and I'm not quite as optimistic on plug-ins, but, we'll see. But it is, I think the better point is it's a generational kind of thing before that needle moves.
So yeah, and one of the interesting things too, there's a huge discrepancy between people who would like to buy a plug-in hybrid and who actually will buy, right? And that's hard to parse right now in the market. There's a lot of things that affect adoption. And one of the things that's also should not be underestimated is the complete lack of foresight and knowledge that the American consumer seems to possess. It's remarkable when, as soon as gas prices peaked and started to go down, all of a sudden SUV purchases started to ramp. I mean, like within a couple of days. It's like they go to the dealership and then they look down the street at the gas price and they say, oh, today's not too bad. That excursion looks, yeah, that's right. Yeah. That excursion's looking better and better. I'll take 2 Tacomas. And yeah, it just doesn't, it's remarkable to me. There's no, and so trying to project onto the customers the notion of net present value or, discount rate associated with an expensive battery pack over 5 years of use and how that actually is going to take you to a better overall price point at the end of the day it's not going to fly with a capital averse, kind of community that we have as consumers. Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead.
Hi, it's Steve Ashley. I have a couple questions. Jan, just a quickie. For doing the life cycle analysis of the PHEV gas, did you include the production of the electricity?
Oh, hell yes, yeah.
So
Yep.
well,
Wow.
Man, without that, you'd have a clear
with
winner.
current production, in other words, with coal-fired, or did you make some kind of guess as to what it'll be?
No,
down the line?
what we did there was actually look state by state. So there are 50 different electric generation fuel mixes, one for each state. And we just assumed that was maintained for a few years. But yeah, you got to be real careful about how the electricity is made.
Because it's a little surprising. That number's a little surprising, actually. It's so low compared to the others, and I just wanted to make sure that you were.
Yeah, we got all the coal, all the gas,
Gotcha.
whatever.
I have a question for Robert as well, sorry. I just want to know, that basically it takes 10 years or something, or a decade, to basically find a deposit of rare earth and then build a plant to refine it?
That's the best available information I have. And I mean, that kind of squares with reality when you think about, Peter Wells has been here. He was talking about the Kashagan field in the Caspian, supergiant oil deposit. Well, it was discovered in 92 or 94, 16, 18 years ago. It's still not on stream. Why? Well, it's complex geology and there's political problems and, capital investment and so on. But with the rare earth elements, not only do you have questions about the ore body, what's the concentration of the rare earth oxide in the ore body, then you have a very high capital intensity, and the chemistry in the refining process, and Jay can speak to this much better than I, but it's very complex. It's extraordinarily complex. And the mining process itself and the refining process itself are dirty. And that's not a problem in China. But if you're in Mountain Pass, California, environmental restrictions here are a little more rigorous than those in China.
So the issue is not the availability per se. I mean, that there are deposits of rare earth elements here, but that the Chinese have built the infrastructure that allows it to be distributed cheaply throughout the world?
Well, actually, the GAO report this morning, I was looking at this morning, I referenced, and at GAO.gov, you can find it yourself. Their estimates on rare earth oxide deposits in the U.S. So I think we're on the order of 13 million tons. So, and the Molycorp mine in Mountain Pass is considered the kind of the best of the ore bodies. But they referred to other deposits, I think, in Utah, Colorado, some of the other mountain states. Yes, I mean, part of it is that the Chinese have that established infrastructure, but part of it is just, that difficulty of bringing production on stream of such an incredibly difficult, the mining itself is rather straightforward, just like coal mining or something else. You get the ore out, but it's that refining and then, turning it from mines to magnets, as Molycorp talks about it. That's where it gets difficult. Did I answer your question? Yes.
Will you guys talk a little bit about diesel and specifically hybrid diesel options? Go, Jay.
Yeah, well, this came up yesterday, and we talked about this a little bit on we had a phone conversation prior to this whole meeting. And one of the questions that I have is in general, I believe there's a lack of diesel technology right now in North America compared to what we're seeing in Europe. And this really can be directly traced to sort of some heritage legislation that we have to limit emissions, so forth. Call for desulfured or low sulfur diesel and so forth. And it's I think really important that we start in this here to really cultivate that technology more, because a 20 mile per gallon pickup truck is actually much more impactful than a 110 mile per gallon tiny compact car. As far as sales and consumption emissions goes. And if we can start having more efficient diesel engines elsewhere, then why not, right?
But in Europe, they've got, because of taxation now, in most of the countries, with the exception of Britain, they've pretty much brought diesel and gasoline into parity from a
Right.
cost standpoint.
It's remarkable.
And diesel penetration's dropping like a stone in Germany.
Interesting. So go.
Well,
Say that again?
but you have more efficient gasoline engines coming online,
Well, understood.
and the incremental cost with after treatment, SCRs, urea injection, and so on is really high.
Okay.
And you can't pay it off with the gasoline prices in parity, in spite of the volumetric the benefits from a diesel and fuel economy standpoint. So,
Interesting.
and it's funny because as we seem to be talking about it, the European public, it's effective. It's most noticeable in Germany and Italy. They're backing away from them.
Interesting. I had not followed that. That's actually
It was one of those things, I found it by accident.
Yeah.
And it didn't make any sense at first until you realize that basically continental Europe, the taxation brought the fuels into parity. Yep. And when that happens and you do an analysis on it, it's tougher to justify.
But in this country, we don't have the same tax structure, so there's maybe a different argument.
Well, we
But
have
there's,
highly
but there's
asymmetric-
still, the diesels are still selling at a premium over gasoline vehicles. So that's the, what is it, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 premium for
Right,
a
yeah.
diesel vehicle
That's right.
versus
So
conventional.
paying that off is tough when you have comparable fuel and even with the benefit. But they're also doing, let's face it, they have more efficient vehicles to begin with. And
Absolutely,
the argument
yeah.
for trucks is pretty compelling. But what does it take to do that? For one thing, we have highly asymmetric taxation of diesel as you go from state to state to state.
Mm-hmm.
It wavers a hell of a lot more than gasoline. So, how do you rationalize that?
Well, there has to be a lot of different policy adopted, in my mind, to make this a reality from multiple viewpoints. So it's your job. Go cook up some articles.
Get busy.
Get to work.
Get busy.
Go.
Yeah, yeah.
Diesel, please.
Well,
right now.
I'm pro-diesel. I agree with Jay, and I was in Paris a year ago with took my kids over there. On the Champs-Élysées, Toyota has a beautiful showroom, and they had a Toyota diesel station wagon, and I looked at it and I thought, man, this is a great car. I'd buy this. It's not available here. Just take one prerogative and just mention the platinum issue, because this was something that came up yesterday, and Jay and I talked about it a little bit, was that these projections on fuel cells, this isn't the diesel question again, but that platinum intensity of the fuel cell market is interesting because it kind of ties into the whole discussion of lanthanides and the interdependence of the global market. Platinum prices spiked about 18 months ago or so. Why? Because South Africa was having electricity shortages. And the refiners of platinum in South Africa
They couldn't make enough.
couldn't
yeah.
make enough.
And the market's very sensitive to, not day to day, but month to month production. They're at the edge of that margin right now, so it's unclear what it's going to take for them to catch up with the kind of demand we're talking about for increasing.
And that platinum, remember, South Africa is the world's most coal dependent. In the glossary of the book, I have some tables that show most coal dependent, most oil dependent, most natural gas dependent countries. South Africa is the most coal dependent country in the world. So all that platinum that's being produced, it's being produced in a very carbon intensive process.
Absolutely.